Whispers, a Meat Parade Studio story. Chapter 1. The whispering shadows the night hung heavy over the quiet town of Ravenwood, cloaked in the kind of fog that choked the warmth from every corner. Only the distant hum of cicadas dared to disturb the oppressive silence. Tall, ancient oaks on either side of the narrow streets leaned in as if they were keepers of secrets too dark for daylight. Elena Harper pulled her cardigan closer around her shoulders as she walked up the cobblestone path to her quaint, century-old home. She had always loved the charm of Ravenwood's historic architecture, its sagging porches and intricate wrought iron railings. But tonight, even those beloved features seemed draped in an ominous aura. Her fiancé, Timothy, would be home soon. Having promised to return before the midnight chime, the rumors circulating through town had gotten worse. Another girl had gone missing last week, sparking renewed talk of the serial killer that had terrorized the small community for the better part of a year. No one had been quite the same since. Paranoia lingered in every corner. Threading through conversations at the bakery and the post office, Elena was about to reach for her front door when she felt a subtle shift in the atmosphere behind her. The hair on her arms prickled, and she whirled around, half expecting to see someone lurking in the mist. But there was nothing, only the dense fog rolling over the street like a slow, moving tide. She shook her head, trying to dispel the dread that clung to her like a shadow. Maybe sleep would clear her mind, soothe nerves worn thin by the suffocating tension around town. As the door creaked open, the musty scent of old wood greeted her, along with the faintly floral aroma of the candles she lit earlier to combat the pervasive damp. As Elena moved through the dimly lit hallway, the old grandfather clock in the corner started its mournful chime. 11 o'clock. She allowed herself a moment's glance at the worn rug beneath her feet, a gift from Timothy when he'd proposed a few months earlier. The rug, with its intricate patterns, had seemed like a promise of comfort and stability. But now it felt like one more element of a life steeped in an unsettling hush. She made her way to the kitchen, intending to make herself a cup of chamomile tea. The kettle hissed softly as she filled it, setting it on the stovetop. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, a sensation that had become disturbingly familiar these past few weeks. She felt the eyes as cold and invasive as frost on a window pane, scraping against her very soul. And then she heard it, the faintest of whispers, unintelligible but undeniably there. Elena's hand froze mid-motion, the tea kettle hovering just above the burner. Slowly, she turned her head, straining her ears to catch the direction of the sound. It seemed to emanate from the living room, an area just beyond the hallway she had traversed moments ago. Her heartbeat thundered in her chest as she left the safety of the kitchen and stepped into the dimly lit corridor. With every creak of the wooden floorboards, her anxiety grew, like a dark cloud expanding within her. The room grew colder, the chill gnawing at her bones. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, weaving around her like a spectral embrace. "Who is there?" she called out, her voice thin and trembling. The answer was nothing but an echo, a hollow flutter resonating through the space. She continued into the living room, her eyes scanning over the familiar surroundings. The worn leather armchair, the bookshelf lined with old novels, the picture frames holding memories frozen in time. And there, standing in the far corner, she saw it, a shadow, darker than the surrounding night, shifting and writhing as if struggling to maintain its form. Her breath caught in her throat, and she stumbled back, crashing into the coffee table. The impact sent a jolt through her, snapping her out of her petrified state. The shadow moved, elongating and retracting as if in silent communication. The whispers intensified, blending into an eerie cacophony that filled the room. Elena could hardly breathe, her mind racing between fight and flight. Just when she thought her heart might burst from her chest, the front door creaked open. Timothy stepped inside, his presence like a sudden gust of warmth. "Elena, what's wrong?" he asked, his eyes narrowing in concern as they darted around the room. She pointed toward the corner, but the shadow had vanished, leaving nothing but the lingering chill and the echoes of those haunting whispers. Had she imagined it all? Was the tension and fear consuming her sanity? I thought I heard something," Elena stammered, struggling to trust her own senses. Timothy enveloped her in his arms, his embrace driving away the lingering cold. He murmured reassurances, his voice a calming balm against her frayed nerves. As she leaned into him, her mind started to settle, the frantic whispers dimming into distant murmurs. But as they stood there, she couldn't shake the suspicion that something in the room still watched her, an unseen presence whose intention she couldn't fathom.
Chapter 2. Hunter in the Shadows. The night was a blanket of darkness, thick and all-consuming, perfect for someone who thrived in the concealment it offered. He liked the anonymity of the fog, the way it clung to the town, like a shroud, muffling footsteps and swallowing sounds. This was his stage, and Ravenwood his unwitting audience. The thrill coursed through him, exhilarating and intoxicating. She would be his next He had watched her for weeks, learning her routines, understanding her vulnerabilities. She frequented the small library near the edge of town, spending her afternoons immersed in books no one else read. Tonight she had stayed late, the librarian's solitary figure outlined in the dim light inside the building. He waited in the shadows of the alley across the street, his breathing steady, movements calculated. Patience was key, as was silence. He could hear the faint notes of classical music filtering through the cracked window of the library, a melancholic symphony that served as the soundtrack to his nocturnal activities. As the lights inside flickered off one by one, he felt a surge of anticipation. The door creaked open, and she stepped out, looking weary and oblivious to the danger that lurked just beyond her field of vision. She locked the door behind her and began her walk home, clutching her bag close to her side. He stayed rooted for a few moments, savoring the anticipation, before slipping soundlessly from the alley. The darkness embraced him, making him an invisible presence just a few paces behind her. She took her usual route, a narrow path cutting through a small park, quiet, secluded, unlit apart from the occasional flicker of a distant street lamp. He relished these moments, the fear and tension that would soon electrify the air, the primal dance between predator and prey. He let her get just far enough ahead, pacing his steps to match the rhythm of her own. Her pace quickened as she sensed something, perhaps a noise or just the instinctive awareness that something wasn't right. It happened every time, the growing dread, the realization that she wasn't alone. He saw her silhouette stiffen, her head turning slightly as if to listen more intently. She glanced back, her eyes wide and panicked, but he had already melted into the darkness. She started to run, but he was faster. With fluid precision, he closed the distance in a heartbeat, hand reaching out to snatch her arm and pull her into the deeper shadows of the park. Her scream was a strangled, desperate wail cut short by the hand that clamped over her mouth. He had selected this spot carefully. A thicket concealed them from the path and swallowed any sounds of their struggle. He could see the terror in her eyes, a mirrored reflection of all those who came before her. It fed him, sustained him in a way the world never could. Shh, he hissed in her ear, feeling her resistance falter against his iron grip. The struggle was brief, predatory efficiency, eliminating any hope of escape. He relished the sensation of control, the godlike power of determining life and death with just the flick of his wrist. When he was done, he stepped back to survey his work, the remnants of his latest masterpiece. She lay still now, her final breath a ghost in the cool evening air. He allowed himself a moment to savor the completeness, the sense of purpose fulfilled. Then, as always, he retreated into the night, leaving no traces, no clues. He knew the whispers of his deeds would soon reach the townspeople, their anxiety feeding the growing legend of the Phantom Killer. But for him, it was more than just notoriety. It was a dance, a ritual that fused him with the shadows. As he made his way back through the deserted streets, blending seamlessly into the fog, he felt a strange sensation tickling the edges of his awareness. It was as if the darkness itself was whispering back to him, echoing not with the voices of the living, but with those he had silenced. A cold, spectral finger seemed to brush against his spine, sending a shiver through his being. For a fleeting moment, he almost felt watched. He paused, scanning the mist for any signs of life, but there was nothing, just the stretch of empty streets and the occasional rustle of leaves. The sensation passed, leaving him feeling oddly unsettled. He shook it off, reminding himself that he was the hunter, the unseen ghost in the night. The town of Ravenwood still slept in ignorant terror, and his reign was far from over. Yet even as he walked away, the whispers followed, a haunting promise that shadows kept their own secrets, and sometimes whispered back. He would return to the comfort of normalcy, to a life that cloaked his true nature beneath layers of everyday routine. But deep down, a part of him understood that the lines between the hunter and the haunted were growing impossibly thin, and the whispers of the night might soon take a voice of their own.
Chapter 3. The echoes grow louder. Morning arrived reluctantly in Ravenwood, with the sun struggling to pierce the dense blanket of fog that held the town in its ghostly grip. Elena awoke to the sound of her alarm, the memories of the previous night still vivid in her mind. She sat up slowly, trying to shake off the remnants of her dream, a tangled blend of shadows and whispers, pleading voices that seemed to seep into her very soul. Timothy had already left for work again, his side of the bed cold and neatly made. Elena felt a pang of loneliness, but quickly pushed it aside, focusing on the day ahead. She needed answers and couldn't afford to let fear paralyze her. After a quick shower and a light breakfast, she decided to visit the library. Something about its dusty shelves and quiet corners always provided a sense of comfort. Perhaps she could find a book on local legends or hauntings that might shed light on her eerie experiences. The library was almost empty when she arrived, save for the librarian, Mrs. Thompson, who greeted her with a warm smile. "Good morning, Elena. "How are you today?" Mrs. Thompson asked, her eyes kind but curious. "I am okay, thank you," Elena replied, forcing a smile. "I was hoping to find some books on local history or maybe something about hauntings or supernatural occurrences in the area." Mrs. Thompson's smile faded slightly, replaced by a look of understanding. "Curious about the strange happenings around town, are we? You are not the first to come looking for answers. Follow me, I've got just the section for you." They walked through the labyrinthine aisles, the faint musty smell of old books hanging in the air. Mrs. Thompson led Elena to a quiet corner where a collection of local history and folklore books waited to be explored. "These should help. If you need anything else, just let me know," the librarian said before returning to her desk. Elena scanned the titles, pulling out a few that seemed promising. She found a secluded table and began to read, her mind absorbing tales of Ravenwood's dark past, stories of witches, unexplained disappearances, and ghostly sightings. Some were nothing more than urban legends, but a few had a disturbing ring of truth. As she turned the pages, she felt a familiar chill, as if the shadows themselves were drawing closer. She glanced around, half expecting to see the dark figure from her bedroom, but the library remained still and silent. She shook her head, trying to focus on the text before her. One book in particular caught her attention: Whispers of Ravenwood, Unsolved Mysteries and Hauntings. It was an old leather-bound volume with pages yellowed by time. She flipped it open, her pulse quickening as she read about spirits attempting to communicate with the living, often warning of impending danger. Her heart sank as she stumbled upon a passage describing a series of murders that occurred decades ago. The victims had all reported hearing whispers and seeing shadows in the days leading up to their deaths, a chilling parallel to her current experiences. Could the whispers and shadows be a warning? Were the spirits trying to save her from meeting the same fate as the victims in the book? The realization hit her like a cold wave, her blood turning to ice. Determined to learn more, she delved deeper into the section of the book that detailed how the victims had initially experienced a growing sense of dread and unease, followed by sightings of ghostly apparitions. It described how one woman had documented her haunting experiences in a journal, hoping that her accounts might one day serve as a warning to others. Elena's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a creaking floorboard. She glanced up to see a man she didn't recognize standing a few aisles away, staring at her intently. He had an unsettling presence, and his eyes seemed to pierce right through her. "Excuse me," he said, his voice smooth yet laced with something that sent a shiver down her spine. "I couldn't help but notice the book you're reading. Mind if I take a look?" Elena hesitated, her instincts screaming at her to be cautious. "I am still using it, actually. Maybe you can find another copy," she replied, her voice steady but guarded. The man smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, just curious, that is all." "Ravenwood has such a fascinating history, wouldn't you agree?" "Yes, it does," Elena replied, her grip tightening on the book. "But some parts of history are best left in the past." The man nodded, his smile never wavering. "Indeed, well, I'll leave you to it. Have a good day, miss." As he walked away, a deep sense of unease settled over Elena. She debated whether she should tell Mrs. Thompson, but decided against it for now. She packed up her things and checked out the book, eager to continue her research in the safety of her home. The journey back was quicker than she expected, the fog lifting slightly to reveal the sun struggling to shine through. As she approached her door, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the same unsettling sensation from the library. She entered the house, locking the door behind her with a sense of relief. Elena spent the afternoon engrossed in the book, making notes and marking passages that seemed particularly relevant. She was determined to find a connection, a pattern that might explain the whispers and shadows that haunted her nights. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, she felt the familiar chill. The whispers began again, faint at first, but growing louder, more insistent. She turned on every light in the house, but the brightness did little to dispel the creeping darkness. Suddenly, her phone buzzed, a text from Timothy. He was working late again and wouldn't be home until after midnight. Fear and frustration churned within her. She needed him here, needed his presence to help ward off the growing threat she felt closing in on her. As midnight approached, the house grew colder, the whispers more coherent, forming words and sentences that echoed through her mind. "Help us, beware, he's close, save yourself." Elena's heart pounded in her chest. She could no longer ignore the warnings. She had to act before it was too late. She reached for her phone and dialed Officer Jenkins' number, her hands trembling. "Officer Jenkins, it's Elena Harper, I think. I think I'm in danger," the whispers. "They're warning me. Please, I need help." The officer's voice was calm but serious. "Stay where you are." "Miss Harper, I'm on my way. Don't open the door to anyone until I get there." As she hung up, the whispers intensified, their urgency cutting through her fear, like a knife. She sat on the couch, clutching the book, waiting for Officer Jenkins to arrive. Every creak of the house, every flutter of the curtains only heightened her anxiety. Minutes felt like hours, the whispers guiding her thoughts and quickening her heartbeat. And then, through the fog-laden night, headlights pierced the darkness. Relief washed over her as she saw Officer Jenkins' car pull into the driveway. She opened the door before he even had a chance to knock, her eyes wide with fear and determination. "Officer Jenkins, thank you for coming. I think the Whispers, they're trying to tell me something." "We'll figure it out, Miss Harper," he assured her, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. "You're not alone in this."
Chapter 4. Secrets in the Walls. The shadows were his accomplices, stretching long and deep in the dim ambience of his home. Every room bore the unspoken weight of his countless secrets, held within walls that seemed to thrum with the life they had witnessed ebb away. Tonight he moved with a practiced silence, a well-tuned ghost navigating the corridors of his own haunted mansion. He had taken extra care cleaning himself up, wiping away the last traces of his latest masterpiece. The ritual of removing any evidence was almost sacred to him. It allowed him a few final moments of intimacy with his victim. Tonight, the skinned finger, a token of the life he had snuffed out, was ready to be hidden in his private collection. As he made his way to his trophy room, the thrill of the hunt still buzzed within him. This room was his sanctuary, the only place in the world where he allowed his true self to surface. The walls, hidden beneath layers of respectable decor, held more than just plaster and paint. They held memories, fragments of fear, and the essence of the lives he had taken. In the dim light, he approached the far wall where a loose brick marked the entrance to his collection. He had discovered this cavity purely by chance while renovating the old house, a secret hiding place practically begging to be used. It was as if the house itself was complicit in his dark deeds, offering up its secrets for him to fill with his own. His fingers traced the edges of the brick, feeling the cool, rough texture beneath his skin. With a slight pressure, the brick shifted, revealing a dark hollow. He reached inside, feeling the cool air of the hidden space brush against his fingertips. It was a space that only he knew, a repository for the fragments of his conquests. Carefully, he placed the skinned finger into the hollow, arranging it with the meticulous care of a curator in a twisted museum. The finger joined an assortment of other tokens, locks of hair, pieces of jewelry, and small trinkets that had once belonged to women who now lingered in Ravenwood's collective nightmares. He liked to think of them as his personal audience, forever bound to him in death as they had been in their final moments. Stepping back, he admired his macabre display for a moment, absorbing the energy that pulsed from the hidden collection. Each item held a story, a memory of the hunt, the chase, and the final exquisite release. A sudden noise from the house snapped him out of his reverie. He quickly replaced the brick, ensuring it fit seamlessly back into place. His movements were calm, calculated, the product of a mind ingrained in necessity and survival. The house was silent again, but he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. He scanned the room, eyes narrowing as he searched for any anomaly, any indication that his sanctuary might have been breached. But the room was empty, the shadows just as they had always been. With one last look at the wall, he left the trophy room, locking the door behind him. The key hung from an ornate chain around his neck, hidden beneath his shirt. It was a comforting weight, a reminder that in a world of unpredictability, some secrets stayed safely locked away. As he made his way to the living room, he allowed himself a moment of reflection. He knew the townsfolk were terrified, and he relished the fear that permeated the air. It was a delicious irony that they spoke of ghosts and supernatural occurrences when the real monster walked among them. Hidden in plain sight, tonight's hunt had been a success, and his collection was richer for it. But even as he savored the sense of achievement, he couldn't shake the eerie feeling that the walls of his house, once his silent co-conspirators, were beginning to whisper back. Perhaps it was just his imagination, a trick of the mind brought on by his prolonged indulgence in the macabre. Yet, deep down, he sensed a shift in the air, a subtle change in the atmosphere of his safe haven. It was as if the spirits of his victims, those restless echoes of the past, were starting to stir. Smirking to himself, he dismissed the thought as mere fancy. Ghosts were for the stories that kept children awake at night, not for a man of his precision and control. Still, a seed of doubt had been planted, the tiniest inkling that perhaps in the depths of his own dark sanctuary, the whispers of the past might be seeking their own form of retribution. As he settled into his armchair, the house seemed to settle along with him, its silence now a conspiratorial friend. The fog outside thickened, cloaking Ravenwood in its ghostly embrace, while he sat in the comfort of his grim trophies, secure in the knowledge that his secret was safe, for now.
Chapter 5. Whispers of Doubt. The morning dawned reluctantly, rays of sunlight breaking through the persistent fog that seemed to cling to Ravenwood like a second skin. Elena's night had been sleepless again, filled with haunting whispers and fleeting shadows that left her emotionally drained. She had spent the early hours wrapped in a blanket, nursing a cup of tea and trying to shake off the growing sense of dread that had become her constant companion. When Officer Jenkins arrived to check on her, his presence brought a mixture of relief and frustration. He listened to her recount the whispers, the shadows, the growing sense of unease with a concerned but skeptical expression. "Miss Harper," he started gently, "I believe you're experiencing a lot of stress. With everything that's been happening around town, it's understandable." Elena felt her heart sink. She could predict where this conversation was heading. And the last thing she needed was another person doubting her sanity. "I understand that it all sounds intense," Elena admitted, trying to articulate her feelings without sounding unhinged. "But I know what I heard. I know what I saw." Jenkins sighed softly, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "I am not dismissing your experiences, Elena, but sometimes our minds play tricks on us, especially when we're under a lot of stress. I have a colleague, a therapist, who is very good at helping people through tough times. It might be beneficial for you to talk to someone." The suggestion felt like a dismissal, like yet another person was chalking up her experiences to nerves and stress, but she knew arguing wouldn't get her anywhere. "All right," she agreed reluctantly. "I'll see your therapist, but just to humor you, Officer Jenkins, I am not crazy." He offered her a reassuring smile. "I appreciate that. Sometimes talking things through can bring clarity. In the meantime, if you need anything, don't hesitate to call me." After Jenkins left, Elena sat on the couch, feeling a mix of emotions. Was she really just under stress? Or was something far more sinister at play? The doubts gnawed at her. But she refused to let them consume her spirit. Her thoughts shifted to Timothy, and she decided to call him, needing his calm and steady presence to anchor her to reality. "Hey, Timothy," she said when he picked up. "Can we talk? I need to vent." "Of course, Elena. What is wrong?" His voice was a balm, smooth and concerned. "Officer Jenkins thinks I am just stressed. He suggested I see a therapist just in case it is all in my head. I agreed to go, but it feels like no one believes me. I'm so tired of all this." There was a pause on the other end of the line before Timothy responded, his voice firm. "Elena, you're not alone in this. How about we do something tonight? No working late for me. Let's go out, have a nice dinner, and try to relax. We could both use a break." A wave of gratitude washed over her. "That sounds wonderful, Timothy. Thank you. Pick you up at 7. He asked, a smile evident in his tone. "I'll be ready," she replied, feeling a spark of hope. The day dragged on, but the promise of a night out buoyed her spirits. By the time Timothy arrived, Elena had managed to dress in her favorite outfit, a reminder that there were still normal, happy moments to be had. He picked her up precisely at 7, looking dashing and composed, and they drove to a charming restaurant on the outskirts of town. Dinner was a soothing, warm experience, filled with laughter and light conversation that allowed Elena to momentarily forget about the dark shadows hanging over her life. Timothy was attentive, making sure she enjoyed every moment, and by the time they finished their dessert, she felt a semblance of peace. As they drove home, the car's interior filled with soft music. A news report broke in on the radio. The announcer's voice was grave, tinged with the kind of seriousness that preludes grim news. "Breaking news from Ravenwood. The body of the latest victim of the Phantom Killer was discovered earlier this evening near the old library." Timothy's hand shot to the radio, switching stations before the reporter could continue. Elena glanced at him, a mix of anxiety and relief in her eyes. "Timothy, what if—" "No," he cut her off gently but firmly. "Tonight is about us, about you relaxing. Let's not think about it. The world can wait until tomorrow." She nodded, appreciating his attempt to shield her from further distress. They drove the rest of the way in silence. The car's warm interior, a comforting contrast to the fog and cold outside. When they finally pulled up to her house, Timothy walked her to the door, his arm around her shoulders. "Thank you for tonight," she said, her voice soft. "You needed it," he replied, giving her a reassuring smile. "Try to get some rest. We'll face everything else together. Okay? Okay," she agreed, feeling a swell of affection and gratitude. She watched him drive away, the fog swallowing his taillights until they were nothing more than distant glimmers. As she entered her house, the familiar chill of the empty rooms greeted her. But the warmth of the evening lingered in her heart. Climbing into bed, she felt the whispers begin again, softer this time, like distant echoes. But tonight, they didn't fill her with as much fear. Perhaps it was the night out or Timothy's unwavering support, but she felt a spark of determination. She wasn't crazy. She would find out what was happening, therapist or not, and one way or another, she would uncover the truth hidden in the shadows of Ravenwood.
Chapter 6. Restless Shadows. He reveled in the headlines, the murmured conversations, and the thick blanket of fear that now smothered the town of Ravenwood. Each newscast and whispered piece of gossip was like a symphony to his ears, the details of his latest masterpiece echoing in the minds and mouths of his unwitting audience. The Phantom Killer, that's what they called him. The very name sent a pleasurable shiver down his spine, but the notoriety was a double-edged sword. The increased attention created a thrilling buzz, but it also added layers of complexity to his meticulous plans. The town's heightened vigilance made it increasingly difficult to choose his next target. He thrived on calculated precision, each move orchestrated with surgical accuracy, and the escalation of his infamy was beginning to frustrate him. Walking through the crowded market, his face lost in the sea of anxious expressions. He scanned potential victims. He could spot their fear, see the wariness in their eyes as they rushed through their errands, glancing furtively at strangers. It was this paranoia that kept them safe, that made his task more challenging. His movements were slow, deliberate. He was amidst his canvas, looking for the next stroke to add to his dark masterpiece. A young woman caught his eye, distracted, hurrying, completely oblivious to the subtle threat that walked among her, but something held him back. Too risky, too exposed. The thrill of the hunt was tantalizingly close, yet constantly out of reach. He needed to switch things up, either by choosing bolder targets or by taking greater risks. Both options were fraught with danger, and neither appealed to his instinct for control. He prided himself on the precision of his actions, the ability to embody the very shadows he manipulated. Still, a part of him craved the higher stakes, the adrenaline rush he knew would accompany a more daring game. The market was bustling today, a perfect representation of the pandemonium he had sown. The satisfaction he felt was undeniable, yet it was tainted by the frustration of knowing that each successful killing only tightened the net around him. Later that evening, he returned to the sanctuary of his home, the weight of his trophies heavy in his mind. He wandered through the meticulously maintained rooms, their orderliness a stark contrast to the chaos he sowed outside. Here, he was safe. Here, he was king. Sitting in the subdued light of his living room, he let his mind wander over the possibilities. He knew he had to adapt, morph his methods if he was to continue his reign of terror. Perhaps it was time to change the pattern, to throw off the hounds sniffing too closely at his heels. The thought of taking more risks offered a perverse thrill. His chest tightened with excitement and apprehension at the same time. A part of him yearned for that high-stakes game, yet another part warned him of the perils that came with it. He needed to balance the exhilaration of the hunt with the careful planning that had kept him hidden for so long. As he paced the room, his thoughts drifted back to the hidden trophies behind the brick wall. It was a collection that both grounded and taunted him, a reminder of his conquests and his ability to outwit those who sought him. Each token was a testament to his skill, and each one whispered the stories of lives extinguished under the veil of his shadow. But the walls had grown restless. They seemed to whisper back now, echoing with the fear he'd instilled. The house that had once felt like an ally now seemed to hum with an eerie resonance, as if the spirits of his victims were beginning to stir. It was a fanciful notion, one he dismissed almost as quickly as it came, but it gnawed at the edges of his thoughts. He couldn't let the walls close in on him. He wouldn't allow it. Stepping into his trophy room, he felt the cold embrace of the hidden trophies. The skinned finger from his latest victim felt like a silent reminder that he was still in control, still the master of his dark art. Though the town watched and waited, tethered by fear, he knew he held the real power. But how long could he maintain that power without making a misstep? He needed to outthink them, to stay several steps ahead. Adaptability was key. His hand brushed against the loose brick, feeling the energy thrumming behind it. Each token inside was a part of him, each one a reminder of what he was capable of. The answer was simple, yet complex. He would create a diversion, something that would make the town look one way while he went the other. A misdirection. He had done it before, back when nobody even knew a killer was among them. It was time to renew that strategy, to remind Ravenwood that while they feared the Phantom, they did not truly understand him. Leaving his hidden room, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The frustrations melted away, replaced by the scintillating spark of a new plan. He would adapt, evolve, and continue his reign in Ravenwood, laughing silently as he danced in the shadows of their fear. The night was young, and the fog that enveloped the town was thick and concealing. He felt at home in the darkness, his pulse steady and mind sharpened by the thrill of the hunt. Ravenwood was his stage, and the performance was far from over.
Chapter 7. A glimmer in the shadows, the days following her dinner with Timothy blended into each other, each one marked by a nagging sense of dread and a chorus of whispers that ebbed and flowed around Elena, as much as she wanted to convince herself that she wasn't losing her mind. The unrelenting shadows and eerie voices continued to haunt her. Determined to take control of her narrative, Elena decided to humor Officer Jenkins' suggestion in her own way. She had no intention of visiting the therapist he recommended. If she was going to do this, she needed to take the reins and find someone she could trust implicitly, a person who might see beyond the surface of her experiences. After hours of research and reading countless reviews, she found Dr. Meredith Lawson, a therapist known for her empathetic nature and open-minded approach. Dr. Lawson specialized in trauma and the supernatural elements of human psychology, a combination that resonated deeply with Elena's predicament. The waiting room of Dr. Lawson's practice was surprisingly warm and welcoming, with walls painted in calming shades of blue and green. Elena fiddled nervously with her hands, the soft hum of the air conditioner filling the silence. Her heart pounded as she thought about the stories she was about to share, stories that had been dismissed as stress-induced fantasies by everyone else. "Elena Harper," called a soothing voice from the doorway. Elena looked up to see Dr. Lawson, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. There was an immediate sense of safety about her, as if she offered an anchor amid stormy seas. "Yes, that is me," Elena replied, standing up and smoothing her dress. She followed Dr. Lawson into a cozy office adorned with bookshelves and framed landscapes, the scent of lavender hanging faintly in the air. "Please make yourself comfortable," Dr. Lawson said, gesturing to a plush armchair opposite her desk. "I've read a bit about your situation from the notes you sent over. How are you feeling today?" Elena hesitated before answering, trying to find the right words. "Honestly, I am not sure. I feel like I am stuck between reality and something else. Everyone keeps telling me it is just stress, but I know what I am experiencing is real." Dr. Lawson nodded, her eyes encouraging Elena to continue. "It is important to validate your feelings and experiences. You are here to talk, to explore, and there is no judgment in this room. Tell me everything, from the beginning." Taking a deep breath, Elena began to recount her experiences. The whispers, the shadows, the incidents that had plagued her household. She spoke about the increasing tension in Ravenwood, the latest victim discovered, and how the whispers seemed to plead and warn her. Dr. Lawson listened intently, her gaze never wavering. When Elena finally finished, tears threatening to spill down her cheeks, she felt a surprising sense of relief. It was as if a heavy weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "Elena," Dr. Lawson started, her tone soft yet assured, "what you are describing aligns with many documented experiences of hauntings and spiritual encounters. It doesn't mean you are crazy. There are phenomena in this world that science can't fully explain." Elena blinked back her tears, a rush of hope bubbling up inside her. "So you believe me?" "I do," Dr. Lawson replied without hesitation. "I've worked with individuals who've had similar experiences. Often, spirits reach out to us for various reasons, sometimes seeking help, other times trying to warn us of danger. Your intuition shouldn't be dismissed." Elena's heart swelled with gratitude and a newfound sense of purpose. For the first time, she felt heard, understood. "Thank you, Dr. Lawson. I can't tell you how much this means to me." "You are not alone in this, Elena," Dr. Lawson assured her. "We'll work together to understand what is happening and find a way to address it. Meanwhile, it is important to keep grounding yourself in reality to maintain your strength." The session went on, delving into techniques for grounding, managing stress, and setting boundaries with the spiritual intrusions. Elena left Dr. Lawson's office feeling more empowered than she had in weeks. She had found an ally amidst the darkness, someone who didn't just listen but believed and validated her experiences. As she walked back home, the fog seemed a little less oppressive, the shadows a bit less menacing. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but she no longer felt alone in navigating it. With Dr. Lawson's support and Timothy's unwavering presence, Elena felt a resolve hardening within her. She would face the whispers and shadows head-on, uncover the truth lurking in Ravenwood, and bring light to the dark mysteries that had enshrouded her life. The whispers were growing louder, more insistent, but now she had the strength to listen and understand. As dusk settled over the town, Elena knew this was only the beginning of her journey. A journey that would lead her through the heart of the darkness toward answers that might reshape everything she thought she knew. With newfound determination, she was ready to face whatever lay ahead, whispering shadows and all.
Chapter 8. Marking the next target. The waves of fame that washed over Ravenwood hadn't lost their luster. He bathed in the fear and confusion that permeated the town's atmosphere, feeling almost intoxicated by his control over their nightmares. Yet his pleasure was tinged with frustration. Increased vigilance complicated his hunt, forcing him to remain in the shadows longer than he would have liked. But tonight, as he prowled the streets, a new opportunity presented itself. His eyes fell upon a woman exiting her office late in the evening. She moved with a purpose, her expression resolute, her steps confident. It was her aura of calm amidst the chaos that attracted him, a stark contrast to the blind panic that had gripped the town. She lingered outside her office, checking her phone before locking the door. He watched from a discreet distance, hidden in the deepening shadows of a nearby alley. For weeks, he had skulked around this part of town, searching for a target worthy of his attention, and tonight he had found her. This one would be risky, he knew. She wasn't like the others, fragile, easily broken. No, this woman was different. Her aura exuded strength and calm, and the challenge was irresistible. His mind whirred with the possibilities. the intricate dance of stalking and striking, all playing out in a meticulous ballet only he could see. He followed her at a distance, his steps light, almost weightless. She walked with an assured pace, making her way to a nearby carrefour, where she joined a group of people. He noted every detail, the way she interacted, her laugh, her gestures, the way others deferred to her wisdom. As she engaged in conversation, he marveled at the trust and respect she garnered. Her role wasn't lost on him. She was a beacon of hope, a pillar of stability. That very role added layers to his plan, complexities that required precision. He spent the next several days mapping out her routines. He tracked her commute, observed her interactions, noted the times she was most vulnerable. His time outside the office was spent poring over his findings, refining his strategy with each passing hour. One evening, he followed her to a small community center where she volunteered. She spent hours there, counseling and guiding those who sought help. He observed from a distance, invisible in the twilight, noting the hours she arrived and left, always composed, always compassionate, traits that would eventually contribute to her downfall. These observations were like pieces of a puzzle, slowly coming together to form a complete picture, one that would allow him to execute his plan with surgical precision. He knew the importance of patience, of biding his time until the perfect moment to strike presented itself. His thoughts returned to her office, a modest, unassuming building that seemed to harbor a sanctuary within its walls. He noted the security measures, the limited entry points, and the routines of the people who worked there. His mind dissected every aspect, identifying weaknesses, gaps, and opportunities. Tonight, he would not strike, but soon, he needed more information, a deeper understanding of her vulnerabilities. He was meticulous in his planning, knowing that each step had to be perfectly executed. This was no ordinary target. She required something exceptional. On a particularly foggy evening, he followed her yet again. This time, she returned to her office late, staying long past closing hours. He moved closer, hiding in the deep recesses of the shadows nearby, eyes fixed on the illuminated windows as she worked. Her office was an extension of her, calm, organized, inviting. It would become the perfect stage for his final act. He imagined the fear that would wash over her when she realized her sanctuary had been breached, her strength shattered by his calculated intrusion. As she finally exited, locking the door behind her, he remained hidden, savoring the final moments. The plan was nearly complete, each piece falling into place. Soon, he would pull off the perfect strike, a crescendo in the sinister symphony he had composed. The name rolled off his tongue in a silent whisper, filled with dark promise. Dr. Meredith Lawson.
Chapter 9, Quiet Before the Storm. The fog that had once felt so oppressive now seemed to lift slightly with each passing day. For the past few weeks, Elena Harper had sought solace and guidance from Dr. Lawson, and it had done wonders for her mental health. The oppressive whispers had receded. The haunting shadows dissipated, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she began to regain a sense of normalcy. Timothy had been her steadfast rock throughout this ordeal, his unwavering support a beacon amidst the chaos. She wanted to thank him in a special way to show her appreciation for his patience and understanding. An idea sparked in her mind as she remembered Timothy's excitement for a new horror movie that had just premiered. Although the genre wasn't her favorite, she decided to surprise him with a night out. "Hey, Timothy," she called out, finding him in the living room. "How about a movie night? I know you've been dying to see that new horror movie." Timothy's face lit up with a smile, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Are you serious? You really want to go see it?" "Absolutely," Elena replied, feeling a surge of affection for him. "You've been there for me through so much, and I want to do something special for you." They arrived at the theater just before dusk, the vibrant lights contrasting beautifully against the fading sunlight. The movie itself was a whirlwind of suspense and scares, but Elena found herself surprisingly engaged. Being there with Timothy, sharing laughs and thrills, made her forget about the haunting presence that had overshadowed her life. When they returned home, she felt a sense of relief and contentment that she hadn't known in months. As they entered the living room, the television was already on, broadcasting the local news. And in a surprising turn of events, it appears the Phantom Killer may have ceased his activities. There have been no new victims reported in the past month, marking the longest gap since the spree began. While the town remains vigilant, this development offers a glimmer of hope for Ravenwood. Elena felt her shoulders relax, the news bringing a wave of reassurance. "Maybe it is really over," she said softly, turning to Timothy. "Let's hope so," he agreed, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You look relieved." "I am," Elena admitted, allowing herself to believe that perhaps the nightmares were truly behind them. That night, they enjoyed a quiet dinner together, relishing in the newfound sense of normalcy that had returned to their lives. As the night deepened, Elena slipped into bed, the covers warm and comforting. the house seemed quieter, more peaceful than it had in a long time. Timothy joined her shortly after, and they exchanged goodnights, their whispers mingling with the soft rustle of the sheets. For the first time in weeks, Elena slept soundly, her dreams free of shadows and whispers. The tranquility enveloped her, and she allowed herself to drift deeper into that serene state, feeling utterly at peace. But peace, she would soon learn, can be deceivingly fragile. A sudden, violent jolt yanked her from the comfort of her sleep. Her body was flung from the bed, crashing onto the cold hardwood floor. Pain radiated through her limbs as she struggled to make sense of what had just happened. Disoriented, she tried to stand, but an invisible force held her down, pinning her to the ground. The whispers returned, deafeningly loud and brutally unintelligible. They assaulted her ears, their cacophony filling the room, vibrating through her very bones. Panic surged through her, and she clawed at the floor, desperate to escape the unseen grip. "Timothy!" she screamed, her voice cracking with terror. "Timothy, wake up!" But he didn't stir. He remained motionless, his breathing slow and steady, as if in a deep, undisturbed slumber. The whispers grew more insistent, more invasive, as if trying to communicate something she couldn't comprehend. They formed a cyclone around her mind, the words blending into a horrific symphony of noise. Tears streamed down her face as she struggled against the force, her pleas and cries swallowed by the relentless whispers. Every attempt to break free was met with increased resistance, the force pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Just as suddenly as it began, the torment ceased. The whispers vanished, leaving an oppressive silence in their wake. The force released her, and she collapsed, gasping for air. She lay there for what felt like hours, too afraid to move, her heart pounding in her chest. Eventually, she crawled back to the bed, trembling uncontrollably. Timothy remained sound asleep, oblivious to the horror that had just transpired. She couldn't understand how he hadn't heard her, hadn't felt the violent struggle that unfolded mere inches away. Curling up beside him, she stared at the ceiling. Trying to calm her racing thoughts, the whispers were far from gone. They had only paused, regrouping for something even more sinister, and she felt more alone and vulnerable than she had in weeks, the brief respite shattered by the relentless darkness encroaching her sanity. She needed to figure out the meaning behind the whispers and why they targeted her so viciously. The quiet relief she had felt was now a distant memory. Her nights once again were ruled by relentless shadows and cruel, deafening whispers. And this time she feared there would be no escape.
Chapter 10. The Conductor of Chaos. The air was thick with anticipation, a tangible electricity that never failed to excite him. He sat in his dimly lit living room, eyes fixed on the news report playing out on his television screen. The anchor spoke with a tone of reluctant optimism, and in a surprising turn of events, it appears the Phantom Killer may have ceased his activities, or perhaps fled the town. With no new victims in over a month, authorities are cautiously hopeful. Interestingly, a similar case emerged last week in Ocean Grove, but the methods suggest a possible copycat. A sinister smile curled on his lips. Copycats. They made his job so easy, muddying the waters, diverting suspicion and attention. They turned his art into a chaotic spectacle of misdirection, allowing him to operate with even greater impunity. Tonight is the night, he thought, his pulse quickening with the thrill of imminent violence. He had observed Dr. Lawson for weeks, learning her patterns, her routines, her vulnerabilities. The plan was set, and impatience coiled within him like a tension spring. Under the cover of Ravenwood's thickening fog, he approached Dr. Lawson's office. It was midday, a time when vigilance was often at its lowest, masked by the rhythm of everyday activities. He picked the lock with a practiced ease, slipping inside the building unnoticed. Moving with the stealth of a predator, he found the crawl space where he would hide, his anticipation mounting. The space was tight and dark, filled with a scent of dust and old insulation. He waited, the minutes stretching into hours, every sound amplifying his keen sense of alertness. He could hear Dr. Lawson's soft, reassuring voice through the floorboards, engaging with her patients, offering solace and wisdom that would soon turn to desperate, futile pleas. Finally, the last patient of the morning session entered. He listened intently, understanding that she must have been some poor, deluded woman, someone claiming to be harassed by ghosts. Her voice was filled with the kind of fear he thrived on, the very essence of his power. Their session ended, and the woman left, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. He heard Dr. Lawson's sigh, her soft click of shutting down the computer, the quiet rustle of her settling items as she prepared to take her lunch break. Satisfied that they were alone, he exited the crawl space with silent precision. His steps were measured, each one bringing him closer to his prey. The thrill coursed through him, each heartbeat a countdown to the moment of revelation. As he entered her office, Dr. Lawson looked up, her eyes widening in shock. There was no time for her to react, no chance for cries for help. He moved with practiced efficiency, relishing the horror that dawned in her eyes, a transformation from professional calm to primal fear. The struggle was brief but intense, filled with the sounds of chaos and muffled screams. His blade cut through the air with surgical precision. Every motion was a deliberate stroke of his dark artistry, each cut a brush stroke on the canvas of human flesh. By the time he finished, Dr. Lawson was no longer recognizable. Her features, once serene and composed, were distorted into an unthinkable tableau of unrestrained brutality. He stepped back, surveying his creation with a sense of dark satisfaction. This was his statement, his return to the stage. He knew better than to leave her remains in her office. The real art lay not just in the act but in the display. He carried her, moving under the cloak of mid-afternoon, choosing a location well away from her workplace. A twisted form left in a carefully selected public space, a grim centerpiece awaiting discovery. The evening news would paint a grim picture, the town's brief respite shattered, their hard-earned sense of false security ripped away. He watched from a distance as the first horrified onlookers stumbled upon his work, their screams filling the air, laced with the terror he so expertly crafted. Satisfied, he melted back into the anonymity of Ravenwood's shadows. The game had escalated, the stakes raised. The whispers of his legend would return with renewed vigor, and the town's fear would swell once more. He returned home, a place of dark solitude and methodical order. He sat in his armchair, sipping a glass of wine, anticipation and satisfaction mingling as he awaited the inevitable news reports. Dr. Meredith Lawson would soon be the talk of Ravenwood, her unidentifiable body a stark reminder of the phantom's presence. As the night deepened and the news broke, he listened to the panic broadcasts, feeling the thrill of control wash over him. The conductor of chaos. He had orchestrated another symphony of fear, and the dark aria of Ravenwood would play on. In his world of shadows and whispers, he knew the darkness would never truly lift.
Chapter 11, Echoes of Terror. Elena awoke to the harsh morning light streaming through her curtains, a stark contrast to the dark turmoil simmering within her. She had spent the past few weeks visiting Dr. Lawson daily, each session offering a measure of solace amidst the chaos. But the brutal supernatural attack from a few nights ago still reverberated through her mind, leaving her more unsettled than ever. Dr. Lawson had been searching diligently for someone more suited to assist with the paranormal elements of Elena's attacks, and they had discussed meeting such an expert the previous night. The morning, however, brought a wave of terror crashing down on Ravenwood once more. Elena sat on her couch, a mug of coffee growing cold in her hands as the news report played out on the television. The Phantom Killer has struck again, the anchor's voice was thick with horror. Early this morning, the brutalized body of a woman was discovered hanging in an upside-down crucifix from the statue of Lady Justice outside the courthouse. The victim was so severely mutilated that she remains unidentifiable. Her eyes, teeth, and hands were removed with surgical precision, and her face was practically caved in. Authorities are working tirelessly to identify the victim and apprehend the killer. A wave of nausea rolled through Elena. The grotesque details of the victim's fate left her unable to breathe for a moment. She needed to talk to Dr. Lawson, to process this horrifying news with someone who understood the weight of her fears. After quickly dressing, she drove to Dr. Lawson's office, her heart pounding with a mix of urgency and dread. The familiar sight of the office did little to calm her nerves. She hurried inside, straight to the receptionist. "Good morning. I'm here to see Dr. Lawson," Elena said, trying to keep her voice steady. The receptionist looked up, concern etched on her face. "I'm sorry, but Dr. Lawson hasn't turned up today. She didn't call in, and none of us can reach her. It's very unlike her." Elena's heart sank. The worried expression on the receptionist's face only deepened her unease. She thanked her and left, the sense of foreboding growing heavier with each step she took back to her car. All day, Elena tried to shake the gnawing worry about Dr. Lawson's absence, but it clung to her like a second skin. Returning home, she found an email from Dr. Lawson sent a couple of days prior containing contact details for a paranormal investigator named Caleb Reyes. Desperate for answers and some semblance of normalcy, Elena immediately dialed the number. After a few rings, a calming voice answered. Caleb Reyes speaking. "Hello, Mr. Reyes. My name is Elena Harper. Dr. Lawson referred me to you. I've been experiencing some very unsettling paranormal activity." "Of course, Elena. I'd be more than happy to help. How about we meet tomorrow morning? My office should provide a safe space for us to discuss everything." Elena agreed, relieved to have the meeting arranged. Despite the lingering worry about Dr. Lawson, she forced herself to move through her evening, preparing for the meeting that she hoped would bring some clarity and assistance. As night fell, she found herself more exhausted than she realized. After a quick dinner, she climbed into bed, the cool sheets offering a small comfort. She fell into a restless sleep, haunted by the knowledge of the Phantom Killer's latest atrocity. Her dreams quickly devolved into a dark, chaotic landscape, a jumbled mess of fear and pain. She felt as though she was seeing through someone else's eyes, experiencing their terror firsthand. The sensation was overwhelming, suffocating, as though she were being dragged through a maelstrom of anguish. In the nightmares, she recognized the surroundings but was unable to place it. It had transformed into a place of horror. Flashing glimpses showed a horrific struggle, every detail vivid and gut-wrenching. The ordeal felt disturbingly real, as though she was trapped in the perspective of the victim. She saw flashes of a glinting knife, felt the excruciating pain as if her own flesh was being torn apart. The shadowy figure loomed over her, each brutal cut heightened by a chilling precision. Elena's screams died in her throat as she was gagged and bound, rendered helpless. The terror was unrelenting, the brutality unimaginable. The scene culminated in darkness, the final moments stretching into an abyss of silence and pain. She awoke gasping for breath, her body drenched in sweat, her throat sore from the screams that had died in her nightmares. The whispers had returned, faint but tangible, scraping at the edges of her sanity. It took her several minutes to compose herself, her mind reeling from the vivid nightmare. The realization dawned on her, heavy and inescapable. The perspective she had witnessed through the nightmare belonged to Dr. Lawson.
Chapter 12. Dark Penance. The dark satisfaction of his latest kill washed over him like a warm, intoxicating wave. The act had been a symphony of controlled chaos, each brutal cut a note in the haunting melody he orchestrated. As the town reeled from the shock of Dr. Lawson's gruesome end, he relished the fear and chaos that reverberated through Ravenwood. This kill was special, requiring equally distinctive trophies. He held her severed hands, the flesh still raw and dripping. With ritualistic precision, he prepared his workspace, the process almost meditative. The boiling water bubbled on the stove, ready to strip away the flesh from bone. Her eyes and teeth were meticulously stored in small jars, carefully labeled and filled with preserving fluid. The hands were submerged in the boiling water, steam rising in ethereal tendrils around his face. As the flesh began to dissolve, he watched with a detached fascination, the skeletal remains surfacing from beneath the skin like grotesque artifacts. He removed the bones and laid them out neatly to dry, their whiteness stark against the dim light of his hidden workshop. Turning his attention to the jars, he placed the preserved eyes and teeth in their designated spaces on the shelf. Each jar held the memories of his past victims, a macabre collection that chronicled his reign of terror. But with each addition, the voices grew louder, their whispers clawing at the edges of his sanity. At first, he had dismissed them, echoes of his victims, unable to find peace. Yet, they had become increasingly insistent, a chorus of accusations and pleas that slipped through the cracks of his meticulously controlled composure. He stepped back, surveying his work. The hands were now polished relics, the eyes and teeth suspended in their jars like grotesque jewels. But the voices wouldn't be silenced. Their intensity grew with every trophy he claimed, pushing and pulling at his thoughts. Shaking his head, his next victim would be his last. He needed to end this chapter, close the book on his spree before the voices drove him to a point of no return. With each passing day, the weight of the shadows he had summoned grew heavier, threatening to crush him beneath their spectral demands. He wrapped his final trophies and carefully stowed them in their special place, the hidden cavity behind the loose brick in his trophy room. As he slipped the brick back into place, the room seemed to thrum with the dark energy of his collected sins. But now, he had to step away. A planned work trip required his attention, providing the perfect cover for his temporary absence. He relished the thought of leaving Ravenwood for a few days, giving the town false hope that the storm had passed. The voices grew faint, their presence a mere background hum as he packed his suitcase. The trip would take him far from Ravenwood, a brief respite from both his physical actions and his ghosts. He knew the whispers would follow, silent companions on his journey. He locked up his house, the finality of his actions sharpening his resolve. The next one would be the last, his grand finale. As he drove away from Ravenwood, the fog of the town stayed behind, a dark veil over his activities and the chaos he had created. The open road stretched out before him, a temporary escape from the atmosphere he had cultivated. For the next 3 days, he would exist in a different reality, one free from the immediate clutches of his dark deeds. He could almost feel the tension lifting, the voices receding as he drove further away. But deep down, he knew that this was only a temporary truce. His actions had forged a bond with these whispers, one that wouldn't be easily broken. Yet, for now, he savored the illusion of peace. The culmination of his works was on the horizon, and when he returned, he would orchestrate his grand finale with the same precision that had defined his every move. Ravenwood might breathe easier in his absence, but the darkness would always return, awaiting its final performance.
Chapter 13, Echoes of Revelation. The morning was a haze of disbelief and dread. Elena couldn't erase the image of Dr. Lawson's brutalized body from her mind. Recognizing the danger of revealing her knowledge to the police, she refrained from contacting them. Her emotional state, coupled with the alarming specificity of her insights, would no doubt cast suspicion on her. Instead, she clung to her appointment with Caleb Reyes, the paranormal investigator. This meeting was her last shred of hope, a desperate bid to unravel the dark mysteries consuming her life. She arrived at Caleb's office, an old building filled with the scent of aged paper and incense. Caleb greeted her warmly, his demeanor calm and assuring, a stark contrast to the chaos churning within her. "Elena, please come in," he said, gesturing toward a comfortable chair. "Let's start from the beginning. Tell me everything." With a deep breath, she recounted the whispers, the shadows, and the brutal attack that had finally shaken her to the core. She talked about her sessions with Dr. Lawson and the nightmare that had led her to discover the true horror of the Phantom Killer's latest victim. Caleb listened intently, nodding occasionally, his expression a thoughtful mask. When Elena finished, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders, but the anxiety remained, simmering just beneath the surface. "Elena," Caleb began, choosing his words carefully, "it seems these entities are trying to contact you. The incidents increased when Dr. Lawson was helping you ignore them, correct?" Elena nodded, her mind replaying the relentless whispering and shadowy apparitions that had plagued her nights. "Sometimes," he continued, "spirits become more aggressive when they have a message to deliver. They may have been desperate to warn you, especially about something as grave as this. I suggest opening yourself to them. Allow them to communicate. I can show you some techniques to make contact easier." Elena hesitated, but eventually agreed, desperate for answers and guided by a cautious hope that this might finally bring clarity. Caleb demonstrated several grounding and opening exercises meant to amplify her receptivity to the spirits. Armed with these techniques, she returned home. Timothy had informed her earlier that he would be working late, providing her an ideal opportunity to attempt contact without disturbance. That evening, after ensuring the house was secure, Elena began the exercises Caleb had taught her. She focused on her breathing, grounding herself, allowing her mind to open and invite the spirits in. For a long time, nothing happened. She felt foolish, on the verge of giving up, when the air in the room grew noticeably colder. The shadows lengthened and deepened, taking on a life of their own. One by one, apparitions began to materialize before her. Women with faces marked by sorrow and pain stood silently, their presence filling the room with a chilling energy. Although she couldn't immediately place them, a dreadful familiarity gnawed at the edges of her consciousness. Finally, the last apparition formed, clearer and more distinct than the rest. Dr. Meredith Lawson stood there, looking as calm and composed in death as she had in life, even in her spectral form. Tears streamed down Elena's face as she struggled to comprehend the full weight of what she was seeing. "What do you want with me?" she asked, her voice breaking. Dr. Lawson's spectral presence seemed to waver for a moment before she spoke in her familiar, soothing tone. "These ladies have been trying to warn you, Elena. You are in great danger. The man who murdered us has now set his sights on you." Each ghostly figure nodded in unison, their expressions a mixture of urgency and sorrow as Dr. Lawson continued. "We are connected to him because of what he did to us. We can feel his intentions, his plans. He is on his way to take his final victim. That victim is you." The words hung heavy in the air, settling into Elena's bones with the weight of grim certainty. Fear coursed through her veins as she attempted to make sense of it all. "But who is he? Who is this man?" she pleaded, needing to know the face of her enemy. The room's temperature dropped further, and the apparitions moved closer, their figures shimmering with residual agony. Dr. Lawson took a step forward, her transparent eyes locking onto Elena's. "He hides behind a mask of innocence, playing the role of the loving fianca. Beware, for he is already here." The doorbell rang, piercing the heavy silence. Elena's heart pounded in her chest as the room's atmosphere grew even heavier. She felt the spirits close in around her, their presence almost tangible. The door creaked open slowly. Timothy stepped into the room, his face a mask of innocent concern. "Elena, love, are you all right? I came home early because I was worried about you." It took a moment for the realization to settle in. Her body went cold as the final pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. The loving fiancé, the one who had been her rock through it all, was the very monster responsible for the horror that surrounded her. Timothy's eyes glinted with an unspoken malice as he noticed the recognition dawning in her eyes. The shadows around Elena roared to life, the whispers of the dead growing deafening as her world collapsed around her. The final piece had been revealed, and her greatest fear was now standing right before her. As the spectral voices of the victims swirled in a cacophony of warnings, Elena knew she had to act. The man she loved was the Phantom, and her life was hanging by a fragile thread, caught in the chilling grasp of his dark reality. Chapter 14, Shadows Dispelling. The room closed in around her, every shadow taking on a sinister form as Timothy's Fafe aide fell away. His face, once that of a caring fiancé, twisted into a horrifying mask of malevolence and insanity. Elena stood frozen, her mind racing to catch up with the reality unraveling before her. The whispers of the spirits echoed louder as Timothy's presence sped their energy. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for, Elena," Timothy sneered, a mad glimmer lighting his eyes. "But it's too late now. It's all too late." He advanced slowly, the room's temperature plummeting as the apparitions of his victims grew agitated, their presence filling the space with oppressive energy. "Why?" Elena choked out, her voice trembling. "Why did you do all this?" Timothy laughed. A hollow, unsettling sound. Chaos, Elena. Pure, unbridled chaos. People live their lives in blissful ignorance, thinking they're safe, thinking they can control their little worlds. But I showed them that the shadows hold more power than their feeble lights. His eyes bore into hers, the madness in his voice undulating with every word. Each one of them was a testament, a reminder that control is an illusion. And now, you, my greatest creation, the one who trusted and loved me, will be the final piece. With a sudden lunge, Timothy closed the distance between them, his hands encircling her throat. Elena gasped, her body reacting in panic as she clawed at his hand, struggling to break free. The strength of his grip was overwhelming, her vision darkening at the edges as the oxygen slipped away. "Your pleas are useless," Timothy hissed, his face inches from hers, madness pulsing through every word. "No one can save you now." Elena felt her strength waning, her desperate cries for help barely audible, but as her voice faltered, the whispers of the voices grew louder, not just in the room, but in Timothy's mind as well. She could feel the energy shifting, the spirits drawing closer. "Help," she managed to whisper, her last ounce of strength fading. Suddenly, Timothy's grip faltered. His face contorted in agony as the voices of his victims crescendoed into a deafening roar. He stumbled back, clutching his head, the synchronized screams of the dead carving into his sanity number. "No," he screamed, his voice a guttural wail. "Get out of my head." Elena fell to the floor, gasping for breath as Timothy stumbled blindly around the room. The spectral figures of the women closed in on him, their collective anguish breaking the barriers between the living and the dead. The energy in the room was palpable, a maelstrom of justice and vengeance, fleeing the onslaught of voices. Timothy ran out of the house, the spirits relentlessly pursuing him. His screams echoed down the street, growing more desperate with each step. In his blind panic, he ran into the road, not seeing the truck barreling toward him. The impact was swift, his body crumpling under the force. He lay on the roadside, broken and bleeding, the voices still screaming in his mind. His last moments were filled with the agony of his victim's retribution, the chaotic symphony of his life ending in a discordant wail. Back in the house, Elena managed to stand, her body trembling with the aftermath of terror. Desperation fueled her as she reached for her phone and called the police. Her voice was raw, but the relief of survival gave her the strength to speak. The police arrived quickly, their investigation leading them to the hidden trophies behind the brick wall. The relics of Timothy's brutal acts were collected reverently, a dark chapter in Ravenwood's history finally beginning its close. The news spread through the town like wildfire. The Phantom Killer had been unmasked, his reign of terror ending not in glory but in a fitting, chaotic demise. The victims' remains were returned to their graves, the town beginning the slow process of healing. Elena stood by as the investigators took away the trophies, the weight of their discovery a bitter relief. She knew that moving on would be a process, but she no longer felt the oppressive presence of the spirits. They had found their peace, and in doing so, had given her the chance for hers. Life in Ravenwood would never be the same. But as the fog lifted and the shadows receded, Elena felt a quiet strength within her. She had faced the darkest depths of human depravity and had emerged wounded but resilient. In the months that followed, she continued her sessions with Caleb Reyes, not just for closure, but for understanding. The supernatural would always be a part of her life, but now it was something she could approach with wisdom and strength. Elena moved on, finding solace in the simple things, friends, community, and the promise of a future unmarred by the whispers of the past. Her story, though dark and harrowing, became a testament to survival and the unyielding spirit of those touched by shadows, but determined to walk in the light.